Hello, how's it going, you guys? My name is Anthony Villalobos. I'm currently a senior here at the University of Laverne. For today's class and my subject of topic, my case study is going to be on ICE immigration raids and public administration, which has to do with our class and pretty much like tragedies and situations that are going around in this day and time, not just in the city of Los Angeles, Chicago, Texas, other states around the country. What are immigration rates? So in 2025, policies, legal changes, and pretty much the scope. So pretty much ICE immigration, and specifically in Southern California, where I live, and in Illinois in the suburbs in 2025, there's been like key court orders from the Supreme Court recently lifted limits to where we are roving patrols on immigration sweeps that have been restricted in like Los Angeles, Southern California, but now agents can now stop question individuals totally just based on certain circumstances and other standards, including factors just like appearance, accent, or just by the area they're working in. Also, ICE reversed guidelines and had to pause raids at farms, hotels, and restaurants because those worksite sectors, like those are now resumed. And why this matters, the policy implications, enforcement tactics, expand legal boundaries, and pretty much like the Fourth Amendment. And those are all in question due to the economic and labor market impacts. And then just our human right concerns, potential racial profiling, stops based on language, the way they look, and just the denial of access to counsel. I mean, people are getting picked up at their court hearings, so which is like crazy alone. HR challenges, ICE staff has been training and the morale and legal risk, community interactions, also indirect effects on local government employees such as schools, social services, and just dealing with people just being absent all the time and just not showing up. So here's a quick little video.
How will you able to offer the Percy?
80-year-old owner of a Van Nuys car wash says he was beaten, battered, and shoved to the ground during an ICE raid that turned violent last week. He says he is a U.S. citizen and was also wrongfully detained.
Tonight, he's speaking out about his injuries and why he says the agents went too far. Carlos Salcedo live in Van Nuys with the story you'll see only on 5. Carlos.
Yeah, Micah, share everything unfolded at this car wash behind me here in Van Nuys. The 80-year-old U.S. citizen says he wasn't trying to intervene, simply get answers. That's when armed masked men turned their attention towards him, leaving him badly injured.
You can see my arm. They threw me in the front, they're all black.
Rafi Shoehead shows us the injuries he sustained, including a dislocated elbow, after his business was raided by federal immigration officials last week. Surveillance video shows as the 80-year-old car wash owner gets shoved to the ground by a masked agent as he's running down a narrow hallway. Rafi says he didn't know what was going on, and when he came to the defense of one of his employees outside Valley Car Wash in Van Nuys, an unidentified officer pushes him back before throwing him to the ground as backup arrives.
They grabbed one of my guys, and I told him, hold on, most of these people, they have a paper, we have documentation here, and the only thing they said is, don't F with the eyes, we are here. And they threw me on the floor, and 3 of them, they jumped on me and they were sitting on me.
Rafi says 5 of his employees were detained by ICE that Tuesday morning. He requested medical attention after being roughed up with a heart condition, but instead he was placed in handcuffs and taken to the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown LA.
I was asking them, let me talk to somebody. I need to go home. I need my medicine. I am hungry. No, there is nothing we can do. You have to wait. You have to wait.
The U.S. citizen was released hours later. That's when his family finally took him to the hospital.
Again, my dad, he's 80 years old and he has a heart condition and he begged and pleaded, and told him as soon as that second attack, that second push down, he said, I have a heart condition. I'm an old man. I want the ambulance. And they completely denied him and ignored him.
Rafi's ribs were left busted. Both his
So yeah, that's just a little example of not one, but there's multiple occasions that this has gone on, and even on this stage or even worse or more severe. So human resource management and ICE capabilities, ethical challenges, and staff morale. What has changed recently? So in Los Angeles, earlier rulings prohibited certain practices, so stopping individuals solely based on race, language, or work type, or and depending on the location. And then the Supreme Court has now lifted those limits, and agents can again use the totally of circumstance standard. DHS reversed earlier guidance that had paused raids at farms, hotels. Now those sectors are being targeted again. New operations of jurisdiction. For example, like in Illinois, targeting undocumented immigrants, specifically those with criminal record in the Chicago and suburbs. So some key factors would be federal government, so like the ICE, DHS, and U.S. Department of Justice, judicial system, so the district courts, TROs, appeals courts, Supreme Court, state and local governments, so California cities, Illinois state and local jurisdictions, immigration communities, and other local service providers like schools, businesses, or in-work sectors. So HR impact beyond the agency, so school, community, and social services. So HR challenges with ICE. So training and legal knowledge, agents must understand like the constitutional limits of frequent legal shifts. Like for example, court heroes, Supreme Court decisions, just make all that kind of stuff hard too. The capability and workload. So enforcement goals are large, reverse and positive sectors, once again target increasing volume of operations. So agents and workloads likely intensify. Um, and then on the other hand, like moral ethics stress, so agents operating on a consented environment with public and legal challenges, risk of accused of being profiled or abused, and also the pressure of just to meet political and policy expectations. So a couple indirect effects would be like emotional and psychological toll on immigrant communities. So just like fear, stress, and absenteeism just from like students and people not showing up to school or work. Local law enforcement for first responders may be affected just because their involvement with ICE operations and unclear lines of like communication. For example, like in Illinois, when local officials say they aren't being informed about operations going on in the community, which is like it's just being caught by surprise. And just like social service agencies, legal aid providers may be overwhelmed with demands, just with the counsel and rights of information. So public decision making with stakeholders and trade-offs. Decision makers like the executive branch, DHS, ICE have balanced goals, more aggressive immigration enforcement versus like concerns of civil liberties and economic distributions. Stakeholder involvement and the lack pretty much the local governments like LA, Chicago, and suburban municipals have often reacted rather than part of planning sanctuary jurisdictions that push back and just community advocacy groups like coming together and not always being consulted before policy shifts. And then just evidence being used or ignored. So some academic or economic studies show that labor mark impacts where workforce drops, uh, in agriculture when rates increase, and just studies that like pretty much show that. And we have like that, for example, right here in California when they just did them in like Oxnard. And then legal procedures. So then just your court have evaluated the constitution reasonable for suspicion, which at the end just limits the place of federal agency operations. Leadership and organizational change, so strategy, communication, and resistance. So the leadership strategy, I feel like ISDHS leadership under the current administration appears committed to expanding the enforcement, lifting pauses, and reversing the previous guidance. And then like the messaging, like the authority to protect itself, however necessary, which is like, crazy. And just like the change in management culture and the communication, just rapid changes in policy require just more of an internal communication to ensure agents have like the current rules, limits, and legal risks and know like what to work with. And just changing the culture. I mean, might need some reinforcement on like legal norms, constitutional constraints, or just ethical behavior. Handling resistance, so resistance from legal form TROs, lawsuits, from local governments, sanctuaries, not being able to work in certain areas, publicly challenging operations, or just like community protests, pushbacks, public strikes, stuff like that. Or just like getting feedback, adaptation, and oversight. So some oversight via courts, jurisdiction, and justices, or temporary restraining orders have shaped what enforcements can or cannot do. So based off that, I mean, a few recommendations would be just applying the theory possible. I mean, strengthen oversight accountability within ISDHS, specifically around their HR and ethical training, as like the huge one that I like was pretty much like hammering the nail on. Building and monitoring like the social economic impacts with like school absenteeism, work distribution, and just the use of data to actually get like the real numbers. Because people are just saying like, oh, he said, she said, when it's like that's really like not the case. And then just to invest in training staff and constitutional rights, cultural competency, and community relations. It's always a huge thing just because instead of like separating us when there's some, it might be a need, like it's just bringing us together. And I want to end on that note. And I really want to thank you guys for taking your time and listening to me and my presentation. Thank you so very much.